your slides are a little bit different than what was posted because I reviewed it a little bit with Rich today, and we just made some edits and tweaks just so that we all understand everything that I'm trying to present. So, tonight, again, our goal is to provide business direction through transparency and detail. Also note, again, our number projections are fluid, which they need to move, especially this time of year when things are still adjusting. In tonight's workshop, we will do a final review of 23-24 budget. We will present the shared business office FEH BOCES, what happens after ESSER money, updated administrative program capital budgets, estimated property tax, fund balance projection update, reserve plan, and propositions. And here is our administration budget part one. Keep in mind, because there's so many lines, we kind of had to broke it down into two parts, but this is our first part. The one I will highlight tonight is just because this was a little bit higher than we projected early on. We will show you a slide in a second why our administration for OC services is $522,984 expense, and why there was a $109 difference, $100,000 difference over the last year's budget. This is also one of the adjustments that we did. Previously, one of our administration salaries were in a different tagline. Because this is an administration budget, we had to make sure all of the administration costs are in that budget code. So we actually put it into a supervisory salary. So that's why there's that uptick.
Where was it before?
It was actually in the handicap instruction. So if we look back for handicap instruction salary, that was where that was landed before.
Okay, thank you.
And total administration budget is $1,516,555, for a $175,000 difference, for 13.1% difference. Again, most of it was salary, and also the adjustment with the business office. Keep in mind, comparative to last year, there was no extra administration salary within any of last year's budget. So regardless of handicapped or where we are bending it here, it was not in last year's budget. And here is the slide about our shared business office with Franklin Essex Hamilton BOCES. Fort Edward has bought services, and these are the services that you have purchased. One is the business management administration segment, district treasurer, payroll, accounting, treasurer support, accounts payable, claims auditing, and labor relations specialist, LSR. There is a whole entire team that backs up the Fort Edward Business Office. And that includes all training, tech, equipment, materials, and as well as management oversight. So any trainings that any of our staff goes to, any kind of extra equipment needs that we need from Franklin Essex Hamilton, they will provide that as part of this entire price tag, $522,984. But because you guys have a great BOCES aid ratio, which is usually 81%, but for this shared business office, it's 54%. You actually will get back every year when you pay out, you're getting back $282,411.36. So what Fort Edward pays for this year will be $240,572.64. How does that compare to some of these local schools in our area that have similar structures of their business office of what their needs are, how many people, and we did 3 that are in Warren County and did 4 in Washington County. You see the different school districts here, but I want to point you to the average of those 7 schools. It's $256,162.29. So what Fort Edward is getting is not only saving money, but you're getting more wonderful services, and that means we are fiscally responsible. I would also like to point you in red that the Franklin Essex Hamilton County salaries include benefits and fringe benefits. These salaries are just salaries without benefits and fringe. So you're comparing, not only are we saving money, you're saving money also because the benefits and the fringe is not included in this price tag, but in ours.
Thank you for that addition.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Very good.
All right, I want to piggyback with what Tom said. Thank you so much for this slide. It's very good. of the new one, because that one up there does have a couple of pieces that ours and hers does not, so we'll get that. in the future.
Absolutely.
Wonderful, thank you.
And a couple of the questions that I asked Chris, just to piggyback off what you're all saying is, so if you look at all of the services we're getting, each of those is basically an individual, or even more. I asked Chris, I said, when you took these numbers from these individual schools, those were salaries for individual people. And I said, well, how many are in there? Because I wanted to see how many do we have enough people or do I have too much? That was basically the goal of my question. And right now, we have Greg, we have Chris, we have Chuck, and we have Michelle, so we have 4. To go down to 3 in the next year, and they're operating at 3 or 4 in each of those schools. So we're right on par with what we were doing. So it made me feel better too in our conversation.
And also in that deep dive, just because a school district might be smaller or bigger, the job is the same. So all the requirements that are by the federal and state government that's on us, some of these districts are struggling. They're struggling because a lot of these responsibilities are thrown on them. And they do not have the support and they do not have the abilities to get the job done. And so again, Franklin Essex Hamilton provides all of this support, they provide the training that's needed to get this job done at a high level. So again, what you're spending is significantly lower than some of these schools that are trying to do things out of their own resources to make it work.
One other quick question about that. One thing we had talked about, and it might be within one of those roles in the top. This year, we had, I think, utilized FEH for the records purging.
Yeah.
Does that fall into one of those, or is that's a done thing? That was like a one-time
Correct.
cost
That
thing,
person's
is that
actually under
correct?
claims auditing.
Okay,
Sometimes we use that for that kind of purging, but
Okay.
we also have a claims auditing process that's a support as well.
okay, got it.
So the next slide is what happens after ESSER money. I know this was a gigantic concern. It was brought up at the first workshop. We are now expecting for this coming year, $231,438.40 to be used by federal monies to pay for salaries. So this is our gigantic breakdown. This is our salaries in total. This is actually right now what we are expecting to pay out of our general fund. These are the federal monies that will continually play a part going year after year annually. So a total of the difference between the salary and general expense, we're needing $600,000 to pay for those salaries. So again, what happens when this money goes away? What I've done, because I want to be strategic in our funding, the F fund, which is our federal monies, which are right here, we've taken the 679, and in taking it out of our budget, I'm only taking out $600,000, which will leave you a balance of almost $79,000 to kind of play with next year so we can actually stabilize this expected cost. We also have brought in the school aid specialists. In talking with them, we have actually had over $200,000 of money left on the table. With taking out their percentage, we're expecting fund balance to increase by almost $174,000, and the combined extra monies would be $252,988.24, which should offset our costs that would be expected to be incurred from next year on our federal monies deficit.
That's great.
Here is our program budget, part 1. Keep in mind, don't just get confused with the totals. I like to kind of keep totals as they go, but because there's more than one slide, I just kind of do a total at the bottom. It also helps as we go along. Most of these have been things we addressed before, such as our BOCES line, and that was, again, with services that are outside of district. And that helps you understand that that's kind of a major price tag, but a lot of that money, with our services, we will get that back in BOCES aid. There is another program budget, part 2. We did increase slightly on some of these athletic materials, some of the contractual. We we are trying to maybe ascertain the idea of a wrestling program. So we did some research, we threw in some extra monies, we did some research again with Lake George, Hadley Luzerne, Corinth, and also Lake George. We got some ideas of what it costs to start a program, and we were kind of projecting a little bit higher, but that's also embedded in some of these costs we can talk about in future dates, but I wanted to throw that in as well, because we want to be completely transparent as we go along with our monies.
It's not a large amount on that page, but I didn't know what the social work services BOCES, $1,000, proposed it was $5,355.
Correct. We
What
do
is
actually,
that social work?
I believe that's more of the supply end of things, like they have some services that they do get from the BOCES. We've decreased it because we actually, from one of the grants we were using for that social work title, but I believe when we drilled that down, it was more sort of resources that are provided through BOCES that can help that program.
Okay.
Rich, do we know on that possible wrestling program, that seems like, it does seem like a lot of money, but I know the startup costs a lot between mats and, I mean, there's equipment that you have to have. Are we projecting that to be a club sport for the first year, where we don't really have to get top-notch and low equipment down, or are they gonna try to, I don't know how they can go competitive
It's
first?
in the minutes.
Okay, didn't say
The
it.
athletic
Okay.
committee minutes.
Okay, didn't say it.
It does, yes,
Hold
to
it
answer
back.
your question,
Okay.
it's sounding more like club-ish to
Okay.
start. But I think when this was getting drafted, it was up
It wasn't
in
out
the
yet,
air.
gotcha.
And I also did research on what clubs cost, and that
Okay.
was also kind of considered because it's startup costs with mats and just.
Yeah. I know the expense, I looked at it before, as an AD.
And I want to say Chris went worst-case scenario, quote-unquote, only because, so we looked at it as a sport, which we believe will be much higher than it would be as a club.
I'm sorry, could you say that one more time?
Sorry.
we were-
So Chris did like the worst-case scenario,
Okay.
budget-wise, and we're putting it in as a sport, only because that costs more. So we wanted to make sure that, but we really haven't fleshed out what we're going to do with it
Yeah, and
yet.
the side of safety, put more than.
There you go.
Backtrack,
Correct.
That's fine.
And I want to say this, and I could be talking out of turn, but in my conversations with Joyce, because I'm looking at 1,000 versus the 5,000, that social worker. So we didn't have social work services last year, right? We didn't have a social worker on the prior school year. So, and I believe, because I know they have a service that we will probably be taking advantage of now, of some sort to do some, not actual social work, but in the event that we can't find someone who can bill, they provide you with,
UDO.
you got it. Yeah. So,
I think the other thing to point out here is the health insurance is $413,000 difference from previous year, but the actual difference in the line is $458,000. So there have been reductions in a lot of these. Even the 52,000 is kind of negated by a lot of reductions in this line, because if 400,000 to 458, 413 to 458 is one line, you're only talking about 40-something thousand dollars in additions to all those programs. I think it's a pretty damn good total, darn good total, sorry, at the end there.
That was a very good point. The healthcare one obviously is a gigantic cost line. So
It's it's just about the whole thing, yeah.
Our capital budget, I'd just like to, again, put in your mind why there was $100,000 difference in it, reduction. And it's because in previous years, we actually added the cafeteria salaries to that line. That was why there was $100,000 difference there, which actually is not bad way we're doing the budget, because now we realized last time it was a budget within the budget and it's self-sustaining. So here's our updated three-part budget, and the proposed budget for 23-24, $12,312,617.79. The difference, $533,269.79 over last year's budget. You're at a 4.527% difference. Keep in mind, our consumer price index is running at 7.9. So inflation costs, everything that we're doing, the amount of living, it's almost 8%. We've gotten our budget at 4.527. Using the breakdown, 75 for program, 12% for administration costs, 13 for capital.
Thank you.
And I think, just to piggyback off what Chris is saying, the other part that I want us to understand is this. I've been talking to some of my superintendent friends, and, I'm like, oh, we're gonna be doing workshop number 4. And some of them are like, why so many? And, because the executive budget really doesn't come out until April 1. But according to Chris and Greg and some other people that I've talked to, the budget that we're working off of now is the worst-case scenario. It should only get better as we move toward April 1. Now, could it go south? Of course. But the chances of it going in a better direction for us are higher than going south.
This year.
And I think historically, and before I was on the board and as a community member, but then last year as a board member, as everybody knows, we went through extremely tough financial times. And I think the board did a really good job when things were getting very uneasy of, we're going to have more meetings and have more workshops and to try and get information out as much as possible. So I think we're still kind of in that place of we haven't fully leveled out, so therefore we like to just keep the information flowing as often as possible.
Less surprises this way.
Yes, yes.
You're kind
Well-
of keeping us up to date, and we're
But
good
it was
to go.
changing all the time. We really needed to meet periodically because we had difficult decisions to make every meeting. So it wasn't like you're just looking at numbers and this is what they are. No, we got to make some transaction changes here. So that's why actually we threw that one extra one in.
Yeah.
We kept it in.
I think there's a lot of us that we still turn the page going, there's trauma.
Yes. Yes.
We need time still, folks.
Peek through your fingers.
So this slide I've actually also corrected a little bit and did some tweaks to it. I also did some extra graphics that are copyrighted, so it's not a Chris Ritter. But
Nice
I'll also
house.
remind you why we do tax capping, and why it's smart to continue a tax cap. When you don't have a tax cap and you kind of keep it flat, you get majorly hit years later. And you guys as community members understand that in 21, 22, that $300,000 hit hard. And the reason is when you don't give a tax cap and you don't get the extra money built into your budget, you get absolutely dinged a couple years later. So my projection again, let's go ahead and do a 2.2, that's our max. And that will be our levy at $3,537,731. And this is our estimated property tax based on an assessed value of $100,000 here in Fort Edward. With that current assessment based on our levy is $18.38 for $1,000 of assessment. This is based on a no star, so let's keep that out because it gets a little complicated. We'll explain that later, but without star, the current taxes are charged at $1,798. Based on our new tax levy projection, the estimated tax charge will be $1,838 for a difference of $40 extra this year, which by month is $3.38 extra from last year to this year, which is a cup of coffee or half a gallon, yes.
You're right.
Today.
Today, good point, today. So with our proposed budget of $12,312,618, of course, the state recommends us to have a 4% limit, that every budget person in every state business official, school business official, says 6% is actually doable and smart. So I'm proposing, again, let's do a 6%, that's $741,651. And our projected fund balance on our bottom here is after all of our reserve is moved money and our appropriated fund balance is moved to the budget to sustain our budget. So after all of what we're gonna be talking about, this is still what we will be left off with our fund balance. So just keep that in mind, very healthy at a 6%, based again on what our budget, our proposed budget will be. But it's smart to have money that we can kind of have left for, charges that we might be sustaining, but we're putting a lot of extra thought into the budget process here.
Understand, Chris, for a long time, we thought fund balance was like some ethereal thing that we're never gonna see anyway. So it's nice to have the time, a couple of those years.
Oh, I don't.
And I'm hoping,
Never use that terminology.
and I'm hoping as we go through the slides, you're gonna see our school right now looks very sustainable, okay? We've worked really hard from our business office. Not only do you guys survive the merger and Fort Edward is here to stay, we're here to stay for a while. So our goal is to keep this wonderful village town school available for our students, for your students.
Can you repeat that line because anyone listening at home needs to hear that?
We survived the budget or the merge, and we are here to stay. And we are
Great ability.
sustained for years to come.
Healthy and sustainable.
It's just, it's reassuring for people to hear
Now,
that.
Chris,
so-
before you go past that statement, which is a great statement, I understand that we saved almost $500,000 due to COVID. I also understand that we got a bunch of money from the Fed that helped keep us through. What's different now, post-COVID than pre-COVID, when we were looking at financial disaster, and now we're sitting pretty comfortable? What was the major factor that got us out of the hole? It couldn't have